Don't whine. Seat 42. E. Middle row by the toilets. That is your level. Know your place. My mother snatched the flimsy economy ticket from the counter and hurled it at my feet. The paper hit the dirty airport floor and slid against my scuffed combat boot. She stood 3 feet away, clutching a shimmering stack of first-class tickets she had just handed to my brother and his family, her lip curled in open contempt. Look at you. She raised her voice so every passenger at the gate could hear. First class isn't for a glorified government clerk scraping by on a pathetic salary. You're better off starving up there. You wouldn't even know which fork to use anyway. My brother snickered. His wife looked away. The entire gate went silent. For 19 years, I'd secretly paid the mortgage on this woman's mansion, bankrolled my brother's entire company, and funded every luxury she owned, all routed through a blind trust from my combat hazard pay she never knew existed. Today, the obedient daughter died. I didn't bend down. I pulled a black red-bordered military ID card from my jacket, walked directly to the TSA pre-check emergency comms panel, and presented it to the Federal Air Marshal standing duty. The marshal's eyes went wide. He pressed his earpiece and signaled the perimeter doors. The polished granite floor began to vibrate beneath our feet. 6 Air Force Security Forces operators sprinted through the gate in full tactical formation and locked an impenetrable ring around me. A major snapped his boots together and threw a razor-sharp salute. "Colonel Melendez, your private jet is ready, ma'am." The look of sheer, paralyzing terror on my mother's face when those soldiers saluted me is a memory I will carry to my grave. If you have ever had to cut off toxic family to protect your peace, please hit the like button and subscribe right now. Because to understand why I finally pulled the trigger, you have to see the silent hell I endured to keep her fake empire afloat. At exactly 3:00 p.m. on Thanksgiving Day, 2024, I pulled my Denend Ford F-150 into my mother's sprawling estate in Northern Virginia. I had just finished a 24-hour shift at the Pentagon, neutralizing a foreign cyber threat aimed at the Pacific power grid. The moment my boots hit the driveway, the heavy oak front door swung open. My mom stood on the porch with a crystal champagne flute, face twisted in disgust. "God, do you have to park that junk heap here?" She didn't ask how my drive was. Didn't ask if I'd eaten. "Your brother's partners are arriving in 10 minutes, and you're ruining the aesthetic. Move it to the dirt patch out back." I backed the truck into the mud behind the garden shed. Inside the house, the dining room rear of roasted butter. 14 people sat around the long mahogany table. My brother's venture capital partners, their wives, my sister-in-law's parents and nieces and nephews who had been trained since birth to see me as the family charity case. I sat at the far end. No wine glass, no cloth napkin, just a chip plate that didn't match the gold-rimmed set everyone else ate from. My youngest niece pointed at the mismatched plate and whispered to her mother, "Why does Aunt Carly eat off the ugly one?" My mom sliced a massive, dripping turkey thigh and placed it on my brother's gold-rimmed plate. "For my genius CEO," she chirped, pitching her voice for the investors to hear. "The man who built a tech empire from nothing." From nothing. That empire was 12 hours from bankruptcy before I secretly wired him $250,000 through a shell corporation. He thought it was an anonymous angel investor. He gave interviews about the mysterious benefactor who believed in his vision. The benefactor was eating dry turkey at the end of his mother's table. She turned the carving knife toward me, scraped the bone aggressively, hacking off a chalky piece of white meat, the part most people threw away. When I reached for the gravy boat, she pulled it away and handed it to my sister-in-law. "White meat is better for you," she stated loudly. "Your little paper-pushing job has you sitting all day. No man wants a broke, out-of-shape clerk." My sister-in-law smirked. My brother's partners stared at their plates. After dinner, my brother triumphantly tossed our mom the keys to a brand-new Lexus hybrid. She wept with pride, clutching him like he had cured a disease. One of his partners leaned over and asked me, "And what do you do for a living?" Before I could open my mouth, my mother cut in. "She shuffles papers at some government office. We don't really talk about it." The partner nodded politely and turned his back to me for the rest of the night. Then my mom reached into her silk apron and pulled out a crumpled envelope, sliding it across the table until it hit my water glass. "Here. I found old Costco coupons for canned tuna while cleaning. Some expired last week, but if you throw a fit at the register, the cashiers might pity you enough to accept them." I picked up the frayed paper. My sister-in-law laughed out loud. My niece, the one who pointed at my plate, tugged her mother's sleeve and said, "Is Aunt Carly poor?" Nobody corrected her. My brother's oldest nephew, 12 years old, leaned across the table and whispered, "My dad says you're the family embarrassment." He said it like he was sharing a secret he was proud to know. My mom shoved the coupons into my coat pocket with both hands crumpling my lapel. "Take them. Don't be ungrateful." 14 people at that table and not a single one opened their mouth to say this was wrong. The silence was louder than any mortar round I had ever heard. Under the table, my knuckles turned white. I pulled out my encrypted phone hidden on my lap and opened the secure banking app. There it was. An $8,500 automatic withdrawal scheduled for the 1st of the month, secretly paying the mortgage of the very house I was being humiliated in. My thumb hovered over the red Cancel Auto Pay button. 19 years of combat hazard pay routed to keep this family solvent. Every dollar earned, dodging bullets, sleeping in trenches, and writing letters home that my mother threw in the garbage without breaking the seal. She clinked her glass. She was announcing the upcoming family trip to Hawaii, first class for everyone, economy for me. She had already emailed me the itinerary, a resort suite for my brother's family at $400 a night, a boutique hotel for herself at $350, and a $69 hostel 8 meters from the beach for me. "And Carly," she added, pointing the champagne flute at me, "you're carrying the luggage at the airport, all 4 trunks. Don't even think about sitting down until every single one is checked. Your brother's back is sensitive." My brother nodded gravely as though having someone else carry his bags was a medical necessity. My thumb pulled away from the screen. Not yet. The cancellation would happen on my timeline. I slipped the phone back into my pocket, excused myself from the table without a word, and walked out the front door past my truck in the mud. On the drive back to Washington, the highway was empty. The only light was the glow of the dashboard, and the only sound was the engine of a truck that cost less than the champagne my mother had served tonight. But inside that truck sat a colonel who held the nuclear codes to their entire existence, and the launch sequence had already begun. Back in Washington at 10 p.m., I pressed my eye against the retinal scanner 3 floors underground in the Pentagon's restricted subble. "Welcome, Colonel," the mechanical voice chimed. I peeled off the cheap thrift store blazer I wore to maintain my civilian cover and tossed it on a chair. The blazer cost $11 from a Goodwill in Arlington. I bought it specifically because it looked pathetic enough to sell the cover story. Beneath it, I wore dog tags stamped with the serial number of an officer who had commanded a $200 million cyber defense operation last Tuesday. I unbuttoned my blouse in the bathroom. A jagged cloyd scar tore across my left shoulder, the receipt from a classified ambush in the Korangal Valley. That day, I took a 7.62mm round, dragged my bleeding radio man 200 meters through a sewage ditch with one arm, and called in a surgical airstrike over the radio, while insurgent rounds kicked up dirt 6 inches from my face. The Army surgeon who extracted the bullet told me I should have bled out. I sat up on the operating table 3 hours later and asked for a status report on my team. Below the shoulder scar, a second mark, a thin, pale burn line across my left forearm from a mortar blast in Helmand that melted through my sleeve and cooked the skin underneath. I had 20 years of these receipts scattered across my body, 20 years of fighting for strangers who honored me, then going home to a family that handed me expired tuna coupons and told me to park in the mud. I knelt before the heavy floor-safe 12-digit passcode. It held my pristine service dress uniform, the silver eagles of a full colonel gleaming in the dim light. Beside it sat a battered wooden box of handwritten letters I had sent from overseas. Letters about fear, about mortar rounds shaking my car at 3 a.m., about the 16-year-old Afghan girl who died holding my hand before the medevac arrived. I picked one up, the one from Christmas Eve 2009, written from a forward operating base in Helmand Province, while Taliban rockets slammed into the perimeter wall. I asked my mother to pray for my team. I told her I loved her. I sealed $300 inside. The wax seal was unbroken. I found this letter 4 years later stuffed in a recycling bin in her garage by a neighbor who recognized my military return address. The money was gone. The letter was unread. My mother recycled my love like junk mail. But the checks I had slipped inside every envelope, the paper was always ripped exactly where the money used to be. I booted my secure laptop and pulled up the financial records of my brother's tech company. The data was clean and merciless. 10 years ago, when his startup was dying, payroll bouncing, servers repossessed, co-founder threatening a lawsuit that would have buried him. I wired $250,000 through a shell corporation registered in Delaware. He never traced it. He thought it was an anonymous angel investor who saw his pitch on a tech blog. He gave interviews about his mysterious benefactor and his natural entrepreneurial instinct. 2 years later, he used that rescue to raise a Series A round, then a Series B. He bought our mother, the Lexus. He bought himself a penthouse in San Jose. He built an empire of arrogance on my invisible foundation, while publicly mocking me at family dinners for being a clerk who couldn't split the check at Applebee's. I scrolled further down the ledger. The blind trust I'd established in 2005 had paid out a total of $1,938,000 over 19 years. Mortgage payments, property taxes, my mother's credit card bills, my brother's emergency business loans, my niece's private school tuition. I funded their entire existence from a concrete bunker while they drank champagne and pretended I was nobody. I poured a glass of neat bourbon. Every dollar I ever sent home was another bullet they loaded into the gun they pointed at my dignity. At 7:00 a.m. on December 15th, the underground SCIF erupted into chaos. The Pacific Theater map flashed red. An intelligence officer sprinted toward me with a classified tablet. A hostile state actor had injected dormant malware directly into the Oahu power grid, routing the connection through a compromised federal contractor network near Pearl Harbor. Less than 48 hours before military hospitals, radar stations, and civilian infrastructure across the island went completely dark, millions of people would lose power, water, emergency communication. I barked orders: quarantine the Pacific servers, deploy cyber warfare units, full counter-intention protocols authorized. My civilian burner phone vibrated against my tactical belt. A text from my mom reminding you again, buy your own cheap sunscreen at the drugstore before the Hawaii trip tomorrow. Don't even think about using your sister-in-law's $300 organic cream. You'll contaminate it with your greasy government employee skin. I was commanding a multi-million-dollar federal cyber defense to save the very island she was flying to. She was policing my access to sunscreen. Before I could pocket the phone, it rang. She didn't say hello. She launched into a list of demands. First, had I requested time off from my little paperwork job. Second, I was to carry the family's 4 Louis Vuitton trunks at the airport, not on a cart by hand, because my brother couldn't risk straining his back before his investor meeting. Third, I was forbidden from eating at any restaurant the family chose because you can't afford it, and it's embarrassing when you just order water. Fourth was to babysit the nieces and nephews at the hostel every evening so the adults could enjoy their vacation in peace. She rattled these off like she was reading from a to-do list, a task management system where every task had my name on it and no task involved treating me like a human being. When I coldly stated an emergency came up at work and I might be delayed, she laughed. It's a government desk job. Nobody gets fired from those. You probably sit around filing papers and eating donuts all day. Don't make me call your manager and teach them basic human resources. I swear, Carly, you are the laziest person I have ever raised. My manager was Major General Mike Miller, a 2-star combat general who once authorized an airstrike from the back of a burning Humvee in Fallujah with shrapnel embedded in his thigh. I bit the inside of my cheek hard enough to taste copper. I didn't argue. I snapped the phone shut. I walked back through the vault doors into the war room. I am deploying, I announced. I will enter Oahu under my civilian cover and command the extraction team directly from the ground. I signed the deployment authorization. If my mother wanted a luggage handler for her vacation, she had no idea what kind of monster she was inviting onto that plane. At 2 p.m. the next day, I stood at rigid attention inside the E-Ring office at the Pentagon. Major General Mike Iron Miller, 6 feet 4 inches, 240 pounds of scar tissue and combat wisdom, flipped through my tactical insertion file. He stopped dead. His scarred finger tapped a paper sticking out of the folder, the printed United Airlines economy itinerary my mother had forwarded to my official email, which a junior analyst had mistakenly included with the classified brief. Seat 42, E, middle row. By the lavatories, he looked from the ticket to the silver eagles on my shoulders. His expression darkened into something I had only seen right before he ordered men into combat. Colonel, what exactly is this? His voice dropped an octave. You are commanding a Tier 1 national security defense operation. You hold a clearance that 99% of the military will never see, and you are scheduled to fly in a middle seat by the lavatories on a commercial puddle jumper. I broke eye contact, stared at the wall. I confessed everything. The family arrangement, the civilian cover story, 19 years of funding their lives, the mortgage, the car, the startup bailout while they treated me like hired help, the Thanksgiving dinner, the expired coupons, the chipped plate, the niece who asked if I was poor, the nephew who called me the family embarrassment, the economy ticket. I told him about the letters I sent from war zones that my mother threw in the garbage without reading. I told him about the $300 she ripped out of a Christmas Eve letter while Taliban rockets hit the perimeter wall. I told him everything I had never told another living soul. Miller listened without blinking, without moving, without interrupting. When I finished, the office was so silent I could hear the wall clock ticking. Then he slammed his fist on the mahogany desk so hard his coffee mug bounced off the edge and shattered on the floor. Neither of us flinched. A photograph of his own family rattled against the bookshelf. You are the finest officer I've ever trained. The vein in his neck bulged. I have watched you negotiate with warlords in rooms where every man wanted you dead. I watched you crawl out of a kill zone with a bullet in your shoulder, dragging a man twice your weight, calling in fire support with your voice steady as concrete. You once talked a suicide bomber out of detonating in a marketplace full of children, and you are telling me you can't tell your own mother to stop treating you like garbage? He walked around the desk, boots, crunching over broken ceramic, and stopped inches from me. He placed 2 massive calloused hands on my shoulders, the most genuine parental affection I had felt in 2 decades. My jaw clenched, my eyes burned. I held. Listen to me very carefully, he said, his voice dropping into growly empathy. DNA is nothing but a biological accident. Mutual respect is what builds a family. Your mother is staring at a diamond and screaming that it's gravel. You have bled to defend this nation's dignity overseas. He squeezed my shoulders, forcing me to meet his eyes. When are you going to finally stand up and defend your own? He walked to his secure red phone and dialed Air Mobility Command. Without breaking eye contact, he ordered a C-37B Gulfstream VIP jet, primed and waiting on the tarmac at LAX by 9 a.m. tomorrow. Then he opened his drawer and slid a heavy, black biometric ID card with a holographic red stripe across the desk. As the lead on a Tier 1 counter-intrusion operation, you are an absolute high-value asset. You will not fly commercial. I am activating Priority 1 Protection Protocol. A security detail will intercept you at LAX and escort you directly to the C-37B. Do not engage with civilian security. He pointed a stern finger at my chest. Stand up straight, Colonel. That is a direct order. I picked up the black card. The cold plastic pressed into my palm. For the first time in 19 years, someone with authority was not just acknowledging my pain. They were commanding me to fight back. At 9 a.m. on departure day, the black Cadillac Escalade rolled up to my apartment curb. Before it even shifted into park, my mother was pointing through the window, shrieking that if I scratched the leather handles of her Louis Vuitton trunks, my poverty wages wouldn't cover the damage. My old spinal combat injury compressed discs from a hard parachute landing in Kandahar flared as I heaved the 4 massive trunks into the cargo area alone. My brother didn't step out. He turned up the radio. My sister-in-law inspected her nails inside. My mom, my brother, and my sister-in-law reclined in the plush captain's chairs. My nieces and nephews sprawled across the middle row iPads, blasting cartoons at full volume. My mom jerked her thumb toward the rear. Squeeze into the jump seat with the luggage. We need the leg room. I contorted into the tiny gap between the suitcases. A Louis Vuitton trunk handle pressed directly into the cloyed scar on my shoulder. The shoulder that took the 7.62-millimeter round in the Coral Valley. Hard plastic corners dug into my ribs with every bump. The air back here was stale and hot. The rear AC vent had been deliberately shut off. The children tossed sticky candy wrappers over their seats. One hit my cheek. Another landed in my hair. My sister-in-law glanced back, saw the wrapper stuck to my face, pulled out her phone, snapped a photo of me, crammed between the luggage, and texted it to someone. I heard the notification chime and a muffled laugh from the front seat. My niece turned around and held up her iPad, showing me a cartoon character trapped in a suitcase. Look, Aunt Carly, it's you! My brother laughed so hard he spilled his coffee on his shirt. Premium Starbucks espresso filled the cabin. My mom distributed customized drinks from a cardboard carrier. Caramel macchiato for my brother, vanilla oat latte. For my sister-in-law, hot chocolates with extra whipped cream for the kids. She read each label aloud as she handed them out, making a little ceremony of it. When she reached the end of the tray, she looked at me through the rearview mirror, eyes gleaming. Oh, I forgot to order for you. Well, you can't afford these anyway. She held up the empty carrier and wiggled it. There's a half-empty water bottle in the door panel somewhere. When you're broke, you learn to appreciate free things. My sister-in-law sipped her latte without turning around. My brother laughed through his nose. I said nothing. My hands rested flat on my thighs, completely still. The black card burned in my jacket pocket. My brother caught my eye in the mirror and mouthed, "Looser." My niece, emboldened by the adult's cruelty, turned around again and said, "Aunt Carly, why don't you just get a better job so you can be like Daddy?" My brother grinned. "Out of the mouths of babes," he said. Nobody told her it was wrong. Nobody told her that Daddy's job existed because Aunt Carly wired him $250,000 when she was sleeping in a war zone. As the Escalade merged into LAX traffic, my mom leaned back and lowered her voice to a venomous hiss. When we get inside the terminal, you walk exactly 10 paces behind us. Your brother has investors on our flight. I will not have them thinking we associate with the lower class. You act like hired help. You do not walk beside us. Do you understand? The last frayed strings snapped. Walk behind her like a servant, like the luggage she made me carry. I nodded slowly, staring at the back of her head. The woman had just given her final order to a United States Air Force colonel. She had no idea she'd just released a wolf from its cage. We arrived at the premier access counter inside Tom Bradley Terminal. Hundreds of travelers milled about under bright fluorescent lights. Business executives with leather briefcases, families heading to holiday destinations, flight crews wheeling their bags through the concourse. My mom walked 10 paces ahead of me, her chin high, her designer sunglasses pushed up on her head like a crown. My brother walked beside her, arm around his wife, radiating the confidence of a man who believed his own mythology. I walked behind them, carrying the luggage just as instructed. At the counter, my mom dropped every pretense. She snatched the flimsy economy ticket from her purse and threw it at the floor at my feet. The paper skidded across the polished tile and came to rest against my boot. She began screaming, not talking, screaming about my incompetence, my poverty, my failure as a woman. "You are 42 years old and you don't own a house?" Her voice cracked across the terminal. "Your brother was a millionaire at 30. You are a stain on this family. Pick up your ticket and sit where you belong, next to the toilet." The terminal went dead silent. A businessman in a tailored suit stopped mid-stride and stared. A mother covered her young son's ears. Brenda, the gate agent, set down her scanner and looked at me with eyes that said she had seen cruelty before, but not like this. My brother pulled out his phone and angled it to fill my face. A smirk carved into his jaw. My sister-in-law stood behind them, arms crossed, nodding along as if my mother were stating obvious facts. My mom crossed her arms and waited for me to bend down and pick up her trash like I had done every single day for 19 years. I didn't. Standing in that cramped Escalade trunk while they sipped designer coffee was the exact moment the beautiful daughter inside me died forever. If you understand the silent agony of being the family scapegoat, please hit that like button and share your own story in the comments. Let me show you how I turned 19 years of tears into absolute authority. My shoulders rolled back, my spine locked into rigid military alignment. The beaten daughter evaporated. What replaced her was the cold, radiating command presence of an officer who had sent operators into combat zones and brought them home alive. I stepped past my mother without a glance, walked directly to the TSA pre-check emergency comms panel, and presented my red stripe military ID to the Federal Air Marshal standing duty. "Colonel Carly Melendez, Tier 1 asset. My extraction detail is waiting," I stated. The Marshal's eyes went wide. He pressed his earpiece, nodded sharply, and signaled the perimeter doors. My mother's face contorted in panic. "Did you break the machine?" she shrieked, grabbing my brother's arm. "Whose credit card did you steal? The police are going to arrest us all!" She could not process a reality where I held power. In her mind, I was permanently the poverty case clerk who ate dry turkey and said, "Thank you." The polished granite floor began to vibrate beneath our feet as the secure blast doors opened. The synchronized thunder of boots echoed from the checkpoint, growing louder every second. Brenda gripped her counter. My brother's phone slipped from his hand and cracked on the floor. My mother's face drained from champagne to ash. "Clear the vector. Move. Make way. 6 USAF. Security Forces operators sprinted through the terminal in full tactical Kevlar and helmets, moving with the synchronized precision of a wolf pack cutting through open terrain. The crowd screamed and scattered, pressing against walls. The operators, locked dead on my position, converged and spun outward into an impenetrable 360-degree ring. Their backs faced me, weapons, scanning eyes, tracking, shielding me with the absolute loyalty of 20 years of shared service. My mom and my brother shrieked. They dropped their first-class tickets and cowed behind the Louis Vuitton trunks I had hauled for them, using designer luggage as shields. The operators treated them like furniture, walked past them like they were invisible. A major stepped through the formation. 3 paces, boots snapped together. A salute that cracked the air like a gunshot. I returned it with 20 years of authority behind my hand. Good timing, Major. Ma'am, your aircraft is fueled and standing by on the secure tarmac. We have a departure window in 12 minutes. He spoke loudly enough for the entire terminal to hear. The word aircraft landed on my mother's ears like a physical blow. Behind the wall of operators, she rose slowly, her jaw unhinged. Her Chanel handbag dangled from one limp hand. Colonel, she stammered, her voice cracking. No, that's impossible. She's just a poor insurance clerk. The sociopathy kicked in within seconds. She processed the 100 cell phones filming, calculated the damage to her social standing, and plastered on a manic smile. She tried to push past a guard. Sweetheart officers, this is my daughter. We are so proud of her. We are a military family. We support the troops. I'm sure your big jet has room for all of us. Step back 10 feet from the VIP, ma'am. The operator's chest blocked her like a concrete barrier. But I'm her mother. I raised her. Everything she is, she owes to me. The operator didn't blink. Ma'am, you will step back 10 feet or you will be physically removed from this area. That is not a request. She tried another angle, grabbing my brother by the collar and shoving him toward the formation. Tell them she's your sister. Tell them we're a good family. My brother wrenched free, shaking his head frantically, palms up. The golden child finally understood his entire financial existence had been ripped out from underneath him by the sister he'd called loser in the rearview mirror 40 minutes ago. He looked at me through the gap in the operator's shoulders. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. The confidence he'd worn like a costume his entire adult life collapsed off his face like a mask dropped in water. The investors he'd been trying to impress were watching from the first-class lounge, faces pressed against the glass. 2 of them were already on their phones. One was walking toward the exit with his carry-on, shaking his head. I looked at my mother through the gap between the soldier's shoulders. Her mascara was already running. Her hands were shaking. The champagne confidence she had worn like armor for 6 decades was gone. A family. My voice projected clearly for every camera. 10 minutes ago, you shoved me in a trunk like luggage. You threw a ticket by the toilets at my feet. You told me to walk 10 paces behind you like a servant, so your brother's investors wouldn't see me. I paused. Let the silence cut deeper than any blade I had ever carried. You gave me expired tuna coupons at Thanksgiving while I sat on a chipped plate at the end of your table. You told your grandson I was the family embarrassment. You let your daughter-in-law photograph me crammed between suitcases and texted to her friends for a laugh. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. You didn't teach me independence. The Air Force taught me that. You didn't teach me strength. 3 combat deployments taught me that. You didn't teach me my worth. The men and women standing around me right now taught me that. I pointed at the floor where her ticket still lay, crumpled and ignored. Keep the seat by the lavatory. The smell matches how you treat the people who bleed for you. A heavy, stunned silence hung over the terminal. Nobody clapped. Nobody cheered. But dozens of cell phones were raised, recording every second of her public ruin. My mother's face crumpled. She reached for my brother's arm. He pulled away. Move out, Major, I commanded. The tactical ring shifted, moving with me toward the secure tarmac exit. Behind me, my mother wailed. She screamed about blood and loyalty and ungrateful children. She dropped to her knees again and screamed that she was my mother, that she carried me for 9 months, that I owed her everything. She screamed that I would regret this. She screamed that no amount of medals would make up for abandoning the woman who gave me life. My brother tried to pull her up off the floor, but she shoved him away and kept screaming. Her shrieks echoed off the terminal ceiling, growing fainter and more desperate with every step I took toward the blast doors. The last thing I heard before the heavy steel sealed shut behind me was her voice cracking on the word, "Please." I climbed the stairs of the C-37BJ jet at 100 p.m. The burden of my childhood detached from my spine physically like removing body armor after a 12-hour patrol in 100 degrees heat. Inside the cabin, mahogany paneling, cream leather, the quiet hum of military avionics. I sank into the captain's chair. A flight steward handed me a crystal glass of neat bourbon without being asked. The engines roared. We punched through the cloud layer at 40,000 feet. I took a slow sip. The bourbon burned my throat. For the first time in my entire life, nobody was asking me for money favors or submission. The only sound was the engine hum and the ice shifting in my glass. I pressed my forehead against the cold window and watched the California coastline disappear beneath the clouds. I opened my encrypted phone. The LAX video was already trending 14 million views in 3 hours. The American public was shredding my family in the comments. A verified journalist posted the clip. Watch a military colonel's own mother humiliate her at LAX. Then watch the Air Force show up. Veterans tagged my brother's company page calling for a full boycott. His Silicon Valley partners issued public statements pulling their venture capital. 3 board members resigned by text message within the hour. His stock entered freefall, plummeting 20% in after-hours trading, effectively wiping out a decade of his work. My mother's country club suspended her membership. A neighbor posted the LAX video on the estate's homeowners association page with the caption, "This is the woman who chairs our charity gala committee. The woman who policed my access to sunscreen was now being policed by the entire American internet. Every humiliation she had inflicted behind closed doors was now playing on loop in public forever." At Hickam Air Force Base in Oahu, my civilian phone lit up. 47 texts in 2 hours from my mother. "Please, your brother's board is firing him. We are being boycotted everywhere. Put your uniform on and take a picture with mommy. Post it on Instagram. I'll pay you whatever you want." Then 2 minutes later, "Name your price, Carly. $50. I'll write the check right now. Just one photo of us together in uniform. Please do it for the family." She still believed everything had a price tag. She wanted to use my uniform as a PR prop to save the lifestyle I'd secretly funded since she was 53 years old. I didn't type a paragraph explaining my pain. I pressed block user. Then I blocked my brother who had sent a single text. "Call me. We can fix this." Fix this? As if 19 years of systematic degradation was a PR hiccup. I blocked my sister-in-law who texted, "This is destroying the children. Are you happy now?" I blocked my uncle who called me selfish, my aunt who left a voicemail calling me a disgrace to the Melendez bloodline, my cousin who posted on Facebook that I was mentally unstable and should be discharged, a second cousin I hadn't spoken to in 8 years who suddenly appeared to inform me that family forgives. 15 contacts blocked in under 3 minutes. Then I opened my banking app and permanently terminated the blind trust, paying her mortgage. 4 taps. The $8,500 monthly payment that kept a roof over her ungrateful head stopped mid-transaction. 19 years of financial life support severed with a thumb. I tossed the phone on the bed and walked to the tactical monitors. I had a power grid to save. By 8 a.m. on December 18th, operating from a secure bunker beneath Pearl Harbor, I initiated the counter-offensive. My cyber units air-gapped the infected servers at the contractor facility, physically severing the hostile state actors' hardline connection. We established manual overrides for Oahu's power substations, bypassing the corrupted network entirely. By noon, the mission was complete. The grid stayed online. Millions of people, tourists swimming at Wiki military families at Schofield Barracks, elderly patients on ventilators at Tripler Medical Center, went about their day unaware of the catastrophe my team had prevented. My family was crying over canceled credit cards and suspended club memberships. I had just stopped a blackout that would have paralyzed an entire island and endangered thousands of lives. On the final evening, I returned to my quarters at the base. The room was small, concrete military standard. I unzipped the garment bag and pulled out the service dress uniform. I fastened the silver eagles to my shoulders, pinned the rows of combat ribbons to my chest. 20 years of missions wounds and nights I thought I wouldn't make it home. I buttoned the jacket slowly, one brass button at a time, watching the uniform transform the reflection in the mirror from a tired woman into something sharper, harder, and completely unbreakable. The reflection was not the daughter who ate dry turkey at Thanksgiving and parked in the mud. It was a colonel who held the line against darkness on 2 continents. I adjusted my collar, straightened my ribbons, and checked the time. One final confrontation waited at the Royal Hawaiian Hotel. The ghosts of my past were sitting in the lobby, and I was walking in armed with the truth. At 6 p.m., I walked through the opulent lobby of the Royal Hawaiian. Medals gleaming under chandeliers, posture rigid, 20 years of military discipline carved into my bones. The lobby smelled of orchids and expensive cologne, the world my mother worshipped, the world of wealth and relentless performance. I spotted them near the entrance on a velvet bench meant for arriving guests. My mom, my brother, they looked destroyed. My mother's designer linen blouse was stained with sweat and spilled coffee, her hair unwashed and flat against her skull, her Chanel bag sitting on the floor like a discarded prop. My brother's polo shirt was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, his jaw clenched so tight a muscle twitched in his cheek. They had been chased from my brother's luxury suite by paparazzi and locals who had seen the LAX video. The hotel staff stood at a cautious distance, whispering. Nobody offered them water. The couple who had strutted through the airport with first-class tickets and designer luggage now looked like refugees from their own arrogance. The moment my mother spotted my pristine uniform, the silver eagles on my shoulders, the rows of ribbons on my chest, the leather shoes clicking with authority on the marble, she lunged forward, falling to her knees on the cold floor in front of everyone. "Save us!" she sobbed, crawling toward me and grabbing the hem of my pressed trousers. "We lost everything. The bank is calling about the mortgage. Your brother got fired. They froze our accounts. We share the same blood. You cannot abandon your family." The lobby froze. Waiters stopped mid-step. A pianist lifted his hands from the keys. I stood motionless. I didn't pull away immediately. I let her feel the reality of my presence towering over her. She wept, mascara running in black rivers, begging for the protection and bailout I had silently provided for 19 years, while she handed me expired coupons and made me ride with the luggage. My brother stood fifth behind her, hands in his pockets, eyes on the marble. The man who built an empire on my invisible money couldn't look at the woman who made it possible. "Save us," she repeated. "I'm your mother." I looked at her hands for a long moment. "You are begging the wrong person." My voice was steady, echoing off the marble. "You are crying because you lost your money and your reputation. You are not crying because you realize you were cruel to me." I let the words land, watched them hit her like rounds. "When was the last time you read one of my letters? When was the last time you asked about my life? Not what I could carry, not what I could pay, but how I was doing." She had no answer. Her mouth opened and closed. "You threw my words in the garbage and cashed the checks. You told your friends I was a failure while spending the money I earned dodging bullets. You let your grandson call me the family embarrassment while I was secretly paying his school tuition. DNA doesn't make a family, ma'am. Respect does. I spent 19 years covering your debts, paying your mortgage, saving your son's company, and writing letters home from war zones that you never bothered to open. Nobody in this family ever had my back." I looked at her fingers clawing at my trouser cuff. "You broke this family. You clean it up." I stepped backward out of her reach forever. Her hands hit empty marble. She looked up at me from the floor with an expression I'd never seen. Not anger, not manipulation, but the raw animal terror of someone who has just realized the safety net is gone, and it was never coming back. Forgiveness isn't about letting abusers back into your life. It is about walking forward without the heavy chains they wrapped around your soul. If my journey to reclaiming my worth resonated with you, please leave a like, subscribe for more true stories, and share how you broke your own generational curses. We survived the trenches so we can finally own the sky. I turned sharply on my heel. The clack of my leather shoes on the marble drowned out her wails. I walked through the lobby, past the frozen waiters with their trays suspended in midair, past the silent tourists clutching their cocktails with both hands, past the concierge who pressed himself against the wall as I passed, past the grand piano where the pianist sat motionless with his fingers hovering an inch above the keys. Not a single person in that lobby moved. Not a single person tried to stop me. Not a single person told me to go back and comfort my mother. They knew. Everyone in that room knew exactly who the soldier was and exactly who the parasite was. I stepped into the warm Hawaiian evening. Across the water, the sun was setting red behind the Pearl Harbor Memorial, the same memorial honoring thousands of soldiers who gave everything for people who would never know their names. The Pacific breeze caught the American flag patch on my shoulder. The black sheep they had tried to slaughter for 19 years was a wolf all along. And a wolf never looks back when the sheep start screaming.